Hey, what's going on, guys? Phil here with podcast 204. Gosh, I can't believe that number keeps going up. We've got 3 guests today, and of course, you guys already know him. Russ down in the bottom. Well, actually, hold on. You're in the bottom. I've got 2 different cameras going on. So Russ is up there. Yeah, you're up there. We've got Daeron Katz, aka Bombadil, Mama Bear, and we've got Matt Newman. He's over here. So for those that don't know or whatever, they've got me on a different camera, so that's what it is. What's going on, guys? How are you?
Very good. Excited to be here. Excited for the reason that we're here. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for jumping on this. I know, we've been meaning to do something like this for a little while, so it was tough holding off, but I had good reason to hold off, and anyhow, here we are.
Yeah. What about you, Matt? How are you doing?
Oh, I'm excellent. I'm excited. This is going to be good.
So obviously, I've talked to you, Darren, on a podcast previously, and
yes,
but I haven't asked you guys. Obviously, the world's been a little bit topsy-turvy, and how are you guys doing? Is family doing good? I guess to start with you, Matt. How has this affected your guys' like family life? Are you guys enjoying it more, being together more, or is it one of those things where like having your kids, you're just like, all right, you all need to go back to school? Like, what's going on there?
My kids are back in school.
Okay.
I think Russ's kids are too. We were talking about it a little bit, and we have all kinds of meetings all the time on Zoom calls and stuff like that. But yeah, we've been out of the office, or I've been out of the office, I think, since March. Some people go into the office still if it's required and stuff like that. But we've been working virtually for quite a while now just to stay safe and that kind of thing. And it's, the commute's a lot easier, but I really do miss my team and miss hanging out in the office, but we've been making the best of it, I think. And yeah, it's been good so far.
What's been, with that being said, like just for you, maybe what's been one of the like the biggest hurdle at first? Was it being out of the office and not having that direct contact?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's different for me because I'm not directly in the development team, the team working on things day to day. They collaborate a lot more. My team is, it's Darren now, the web development team, design team, and customer support. And so do a lot of events, and I collaborate with the development team as well, but it's mostly for things like marketing and screenshots and video and that kind of stuff. So they meet a lot more than we do, and they use Slack and all kinds of voice chat stuff and video chat to keep in touch and keep on top of it. So lots of virtual meetings, I'd say.
Awesome. What about you, Russ? I mean, obviously you've got a few more kids than Matt, I think, right? So how's that been?
A couple more. Yeah, no. So they are back in school. Like, yours are too, aren't they, Matt? Like as far as physically at school, yeah. So they are. So far, so good. It's different though. Like they've made it so like there's groups of kids and it's a little bit weird, but they're going back. Work-wise, yeah, I think I was having a harder time with it in the beginning. I think I was just mostly filled with anxiety about it. Probably the least of those was just on productivity as a team. Like I figured we have a lot of professionals, and I kind of had some pretty good confidence we'd figure that out, but I guess I'm someone who likes change to happen organically because it's the way things are supposed to go and not have them be forced, Yeah. So my worry was like, oh, this was going to force all kinds of change, like almost force all kinds of permanent change that really wasn't organically meant to be. So I don't know, we'll see. And I think, people can become more distant. Like we had this beer Friday the last Friday of every month, and it was a physical celebration in the office here, and always look forward to that. And we've kept that up, but it's on Zoom. And the first one was fun. Some people that don't normally drink are pretty drunk, and it was a good time. And we're all like, hey, miss you guys, because it's only been a few weeks. Then the last ones now, they're just sort of like, everyone's quiet. Everyone's having a hard time. It's just like things are just more, people are just getting used to being distant. And so for that reason, I'm really hoping we've tried to talk about how we can combat that and get together even in smaller groups or just do some things. But anyhow, so that's for me. I hope that, by whenever that is, sometime next year, maybe by next summer, we all don't really know. We're just guessing, but that we can, there might be some things that are forever different, but definitely I think a lot more together as a team than this, which is almost zero, right?
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you guys just launched Mechwarrior 5 December 10th, and then you know, right after the New Year's stuff starts turning, and that's got to be on your mind, obviously. And then with the changes, I mean, running a company,
That was
that's a
pretty
lot
lucky
different.
timing. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it could have been a lot worse if we were like in the final 3 months of home stretch of trying to ship the game. That would have been significantly worse. So, all in all, I think we have to be grateful the timing worked out pretty well for us. And because we already had a very mature game that had already shipped and was well understood, so we could work on DLC for that. We could obviously work on Mechwarrior Onlines. So, all in all, pretty decent spot to be in.
Gotcha. Okay, so I haven't talked to you directly, Russ, and or Matt, since last year, sometime. I don't remember the last podcast, but obviously in January we split ways, and that was something I guess we can dive into or whatever. And then of course me and Darren went our ways as well in March. I took over NGNG. We've had Darren on. He's talking about getting a boat. He finally gets a boat. And then yesterday you guys dropped a bombshell on me live on stream. I that caught me by surprise, and I was super stoked. Like, it was one of those things that, like, so yesterday's announcement, you guys announced the new community manager and marketing director, if I'm correct, the titles and all that, which is now Darren. And can we just rewind here? How did this start? Darren, you didn't tell me shit, by the way, which is pretty impressive. So where did that come from? Where did that conversation, how did that start, and when did it start?
Well, I mean, I think, sorry, you go ahead, Darren. I was going to kind of go a little bit on the way back machine to,
yeah,
but
and go ahead. But I just really quickly wanted to point out that there was there's a rumor out there that there was a time where you did speak directly with Russ late one night.
Oh, geez, we did.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, by the way.
So we can't forget that.
I got smashed, man. I got smashed. Thank you for showing up, by the way. And you were totally cool with it. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning my time. For those that don't know, little history. I decided to do a whiskey after dark stream, and it started like at 9 p.m. Eastern, and it went to, I think when I signed off, it was around 7:30 in the morning. And I don't remember getting off the stream. Apparently it took Russ about half an hour to get off the stream with me, because I just kept rambling. And so, yeah, thanks for putting up with me.
Well, I stayed a lot longer than I intended. I think that's because I had a few gins too and got warmed up a bit. But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, I'm not the marketing director. I'm a senior marketing and community manager. That's my title. But go ahead, Russ. Go.
Yeah.
Take the way back machine.
I think your listeners, the community, probably want to hear a bit of a longer story. Like at least go back in time. Like, for example, people would say, well, the game really stopped getting major updates or monthly updates, we'll call it, general routine patch attention, when roughly? We go back to summer of 2019, maybe even?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair, like a solid, it's going on 2 years. Well, I think it's, 2 years. I think 2 years is fair.
It's been a little over a year since we kind of stopped the patches, as I recall, but it's been closer to 2 years since there was meaningful content patches. Yeah. Or at least maybe 2 years come this new year or something, because I think our last new mech might have hit. It's rough for me too. So, I mean, so that kind of feeds into, like, you brought up NGNG, you know, at least the official relationship ending in January. And I think most of your listeners have heard this, but, you know, Mechwarrior Online, of course, has been around for like, what? I think it's been about I guess it'll be 8 years. No, yeah, about 8 years this October since open beta.
Yeah.
So friends and family and all that, it's probably been a good 8.5 years since some folks have been playing. And Mechwarrior Online's peak heyday, you know, revenue, production, you know, successful game aspect was really about a 5-year stint from, let's go at the beginning of 2013 to about the beginning of 2018. So it's about a 5-year stretch there from, like, call it 2012 to 2017, 2013, 2018. And so and then, you know, revenues had just really not supported the release of the mechs each month. It just really didn't make sense for quite a while. And same went with the marketing initiatives and things we're doing. It just really wasn't, it it was just an older game. And I do believe that, obviously I believe this because we wouldn't be here today with Darren here, that the game still is, I think, we're about to find out. So I guess we're going to feed into that. I think capable of responding to good content updates, and bringing players back and rejuvenating that base and generating more revenue and making it, a worthwhile and profitable game again. So skipping ahead a bit and then I'll come back. Well, I won't skip ahead. I guess I'll finish that thread. I think it'd make more sense that way. So we were in this position for a long time, but then add on top of that the fact that the license expired summer of 2020. So this past June that we just passed.
Oh, it was June. Okay. I thought it was December. Okay.
No, June. So we were at, not MechCon, but our 20-year anniversary celebration thing. Darren was lucky enough to come because he just had a quick little drive. And we had our Piranha Games 20-year anniversary, and we just had the Mechwarrior 5 launch party, and we were celebrating. But also in the back of my head, I kind of knew what was imminent because there was 6 months left in the license. And now you can kind of wind back a little bit again, and when you have that little time left in your license, it even impacts your ability to invest in content development, even as far back as, almost all of 2019, let's say, because you're saying, wow, we have barely over a year left. So it really affected those decisions. And so there I was at the party, kind of knew, like, well, we're talking to Microsoft, but, I've had this ongoing relationship with Microsoft now for almost a decade, really, and sometimes things happen quick, and sometimes they go years without much happening. And we were hopeful, but I wasn't certain by any stretch. And so I think, I'm not sure when I announced it to the community, but so we made our decisions in early January. We got the game shipped. We made a few corrections with the studio, what we felt down the stretch. And then it actually came together reasonably quickly, in maybe even in January sometime. I'm not sure if it slipped into February. I don't think so.
Are you talking about the extension?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you popped in. It was funny because you popped in, I was streaming, and we were talking about something, and you popped into chat, and you're like, oh, what are you guys talking about? And I was like, well, we're talking about some subject. I think it was like, well, will MW get anything? And it was like, well, it really depends on if they get the extension or not. And you're like, oh, well, we got it. And we were like, oh, okay. And then it was like, oh, we got a 5-year extension. Yeah. I think it was like late January, if not early mid-February, maybe. It's out there because I posted a Reddit and stuff. So
then we get the extension, and we're like, okay. Then we take a minute, of course, to just kind of think, all right, well, what does this mean? And then, of course, we're not too far after that. COVID hits. Everyone goes to work from home. That kind of scatters people's brains for at least a few months to the summer. And then it wasn't until pretty recently, I would suggest even in, Darren, I didn't talk to you until maybe, was it even a month ago? Oh, you're muted there.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. When did we do that podcast, Phil? It was right around that time.
Yeah, about a month.
It was about a month ago.
Yeah. So it was right after that then.
Pretty much, because I saw that, and I had already been thinking of some stuff, and I was already starting to formulate kind of an idea and a plan in my head. And I think, backing up a bit, we saw some evidence during COVID when we did do the one PSR update and stuff, that there was a response in the product. There was a response in the community. We did see an uptick, and I thought, okay, it's showing signs of life. It's showing signs it'll respond. And then, of course, and we'll get into this today, I think, is that I get hit up a lot, of course, on Twitter and whatnot, of people expressing to me how much they still care for Mechwarrior Online and how much they want it to be updated and how much they still love it. And which I love, by the way, of course. And, sometimes they go a little bit extra out of the way to make sure I know that people feel like Mechwarrior 5 and Mechwarrior Online are at loggerheads and they can't really love both. At least a lot of people feel that way. I'm here today to say you can love both. It's not going to affect, I think, because they felt like we were just so focused on Mechwarrior 5, which certainly were for a stretch there. But that was the death knell of Mechwarrior Online. So one of the big messages today is that's not the case. And although, some things are still up in the air, we still have to see how much it will respond. So at any rate, I think I finally started to get my plans together. Come to summer, I saw that podcast and I thought, we've been without a community manager now for since January, I think.
Yep.
And I wanted to get us into a position where we could, again, fully engage with the community and say, okay, let's see if this game, still has good life ahead of it. Because we've got a 5-year runway. Well, touch less than 5 now, I guess. And so that does open some doors up for us. And it does mean that we can do a lot. And honestly, the sky's the limit. I've thought about these engine upgrades too. And I'm sure we'll have spent a lot of time talking about that and what's feasible and what we should be thinking about. But really, the sky's the limit. I'm not really putting any limiters on it. But it'll come down to what people are truly willing to support, I guess, and see if there is enough there still to support it. So at any rate, so we grabbed Darren. I couldn't think of a better guy to engage the community and basically find a way to bridge all those gaps and say, okay, this is what are you guys interested in? And try to, fight through the weeds of everybody's interested in something different. This guy thinks mechs is the be all end all. He just wants pro mechs. This guy has plenty of mechs. He just wants maps. This guy, the key is this, the key is that. Come up with a plan and give the community an opportunity to get behind that plan. And if we see the support, like people say is out there, if we give them what they want, then we're willing to jump back in and create that content. And anyhow, that's how we got to where we are today. And I think, why I felt like I could do this. And there's a lot of reasons, the major one being the license and bunch of things like that. So there's your version.
I mean, and funny enough, because Darren, you said you heard me talking about it on stream, but I was literally going over the timeline in my head on stream, and I was like, if they didn't, because we know you didn't have the extension when we parted ways, and so it only made sense of saying, well, and I thought it was December, by the way, that you guys had it till 2020. So in my head, it was like, well, they're full steam ahead on Mech 5. Oh, and then they get COVID. Oh, and it's messing with the DLC launch. It's like, yeah, it only makes sense because of the timeline. But as far as like MWO, funny enough, I've been really talking about this, is that I think 100% there's life in MWO if it's given some love and attention. And that's why I'm so excited to, talk to you guys about this, because really the base game there, what we've had for 8 years has evolved over a period of time, but the base game is solid. And I feel like a lot of people out there, of course I was drunk when you said this, but I think someone alluded to you felt that you had heard praise about it, but there was also a lot of negativity. And one of the things you said on Twitter sort of reiterated that. And I just wanted to sort of point out, like, there's always going to be like detractors and negative out there, but at the end of the day, there's so many people that are, just enjoy the game, enjoy loving playing and the IP. And I think from my point of view, if this is the path you're going down, and you guys show the effort and stuff, I think 100% the players will come back and the players will enjoy the product even more. And I think it's just going to be a two-way road, and 100% it can happen. And that's one of the things I've talked to you, Darren, is about, like, there are things that there's low-hanging fruit and then there's bigger stuff. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you, Russ, was, and I mentioned this on Twitter, but it sort of had to do with the marketing and model and the differences between like World of Tanks, and you guys chose a transaction model and a system that I feel like is a little bit dated nowadays, where you're seeing some variations of the free-to-play market go, like season pass and all those type of things. I feel like that's probably something that we'd have to discuss is, have you thought about that, and what are your plans are, or do you have plans, or what are your just general thoughts on that? Because the monetization obviously for mechs can only go so far. People have a ton of mechs and so forth, but like cosmetic items and stuff, like What are your thoughts on the microtransaction sort of system for MWO, and have you thought about updating that? And would that be something?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I know that I'm going to end up dominating this whole conversation, so I want you guys to jump in whenever you feel like you have something to add. You're right on the World of Tanks comparison. We basically followed on their heels very closely in North America, and it is a dated model at this point. But also, I think this will make sense to you too when I bring this up, when you look at other more modern games. Very few games can establish themselves in a niche corner like Mechwarrior did. Most games either go big or big-ish, or they just die. So, you got your Apexes and your Fortnites, your World of Tanks, Warframe. You can go down the list, but the graveyards are littered with games that are smaller and even were bigger than Mechwarrior population-wise that just flat out died. So Mechwarrior has the ability to stick around because it's niche, and like the Alexander Keith slogan for their beer, those that like it a lot. And because the monetization strategy was one built around a niche player base. So you can put a more modern monetization strategy in place, but one thing you'll see about those games is they're built on mass numbers. A game like Fortnite and these games, they monetize. So an average revenue per paying user, ARPU is the term, and Mechwarrior Online had a very high one, like $90 for many years. That's massive. 90 ARPU is as big as it gets in the industry. Still probably hovers around 40 to 50. Other games would have a fraction of that, but of course, instead of having a monthly active user count of 40,000 players, let's say, the game Mechwarrior Online still has about a 10,000 DAU. That's 10,000 unique people per day play the game. Just to give you perspective, I know some of these numbers have been more hidden in the past, and 40,000 monthly active users. So compared to the Fortnites, of course, minuscule, 100x, for those games probably. And so you can monetize, your ARPU can be, oh my goodness, like $10, and you're still making hundreds of millions of dollars a month. But it also, I think the flip side of that is when people sometimes, we get that like, oh, it's dead, and like, just play, this mod or something. It's still 10,000 unique people a day playing Mechwarrior Online. That's still, an order of multiple magnitudes higher than maybe people think or understand. Like it still takes, and as you can tell, it takes at least a 10,000 DAU just to get the matchmaker, even the way we've got it tweaked, to function reasonably decently. So another subject to come back to, but so that's why I think absolutely the monetization strategy should be 100% on the table, because we have to be careful though that we don't try to monetize like the big games, because that just means we'll die within 6 months probably, right? Because we're saying, hey man, we're going to change it. Now you can do all these little microtransactions, but unless we get 10x the players to come in, we're going to fail. But we do need to explore it, because at the same time, we need our players that are around today to find reason to spend again. It's just blunt and simple. Like if people don't spend, then the game doesn't get to exist. So we need our current players, guys that have 600 mechs, who have already invested so much in this game that they just probably don't even like to think about it, But we need to find ways for them to find interest enough to spend again, so that we can continue to update the game and not just put small updates in it, but do significant updates. And I hope we get a chance to talk today about what some of those ideas might be. But you're right, this can't just be like, here's the next mech. I'm not just going to turn the tap back on for like how we had it. It's got to be different. It's got to be more substantial, actual features, bigger features, and maybe even different style content if we can find ways to come up with those ideas. Anyhow, maybe this is where Matt and Darren jumps in. And
well, I want to say I can definitely confirm. So we announced this yesterday at noon, and I've spent from that time until just before this podcast responding to people. I got direct emails. I did throw my email address into the original post, and I knew I would pay for that, but I wanted to establish these lines of communication. But email, Twitter DMs, Discord, and I just finally finished the thread, the announcement thread on the forum. And I can absolutely say that while you mentioned there's a few detractors out there, and that's fine, that's a given. The support and the love for these games and specifically Mechwarrior Online totally exists still. Like, it was very heartening to read all the messages, that it took me basically a day and a half to do. And I can feel the enthusiasm out there. Like I said in my announcement, I've been a fan for 35 years. I totally have a passion for this. You know that. We've worked together, all of us, for many years. And so, of course, I'm excited about getting this job back. But on the other hand, I also recognize that there's a huge responsibility here. And, that this is it. Everything that we've worked on is culminating at this point because, we're given a timeline here. We're given a schedule that we have, 4 or 5 more years, which is exciting. It's awesome. Like I've always told everybody, it's a great time to be a mech warrior, and that's continuing. But we have a challenge here, which is, like we were just discussing, coming up with the things that the community wants, things that the game potentially needs, and sometimes those don't match, and so trying to figure that out is going to be a challenge. And then also, like Russ is bringing up, there's just the business aspect of it. We can't do things for free as much as everybody would want to. So it's, a bit of a Venn diagram of trying to figure out how these things come together. And I think that's really the challenge. I'm going to be putting everything into this, my whole heart and soul into making this work with Matt. I'm super excited to be working with Matt again and the live ops team. Some of the best people I've ever worked with. Like I said, it's my favorite job I've ever had, but I'm not taking it lightly. And I am, it's a huge task ahead of us, but I definitely think it's possible. And that's the part I think people have caught on, with my enthusiasm, and that's great. But now we've got to follow through with that and make this happen. And we've got a hell of a challenge, but we are totally ready to accept that challenge and make this happen. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'd agree with Darren too. And just touching on the monetization side of things a bit, like, excuse me, need to drink water, but my kids play Fortnite. There, I said it.
It's okay.
They play Fortnite, and it's really interesting for me to watch them play Fortnite. They're 10 and they're 13. It's interesting for me to see how the monetization works, how the seasons work, everything, how the game can feel like fresh and new just by adding new features or taking features away or giving, playgrounds and stuff like that. And I think Mechwarrior Online did a really, really good job of that over the years. We built an amazing game with a lot of amazing systems in it. And now it's up to us to kind of like, at this point in this lifespan, to see how we can work with that, or where we can go from here with the community. Where can we go from here to make it good? And even just, I've been reading the forum threads as well, and something, you see someone talking about the new user experience coming into Mechwarrior Online. It's like, that's something that, if we're going to put all this work in, that is something that we definitely need to pay attention to, because I remember even when we first started, the challenges that we've always had, the things that we've tried to fix or tackle in terms of new players coming to Mechwarrior. There's always been a steep learning curve regardless, and we've done things in the past to try and help that, and it still needs work. So there's a lot of different areas that we got to look at, and a lot of different areas to figure out what things we got to change in order to make this work for veterans and the new player as well, and breathe tons of new life into this, as well as figuring out a way to monetize it.
Okay, so, and just to clarify here, you guys are basically saying everything's back on the table right now for MWO. You're putting money where your mouth is. You're paying the community, seeing what they potentially want or need out of you to reciprocate them coming back or them spending money and stuff like that. That's basically what I'm hearing. Is that correct? Like, this is MWO, if we're fair, has been put on the back burner for 2 years. I think that's a fair statement. But you guys are coming to the table and saying, hey, the reason for that also, maybe it wasn't clear, but that was because of a business decision that you guys may not have had the license. And so you had to put all your time and effort into Mech 5. And yeah, it took away resources, but we're back on the table. We have that extension. We want to see this product evolve. Or in the case of what I think you were alluding to earlier when you mentioned game engines, and we can get in that topic, but just that's basically what you guys are coming to the table with right now. To be clear, you're coming to the community and saying this is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to figure out the best path of development. And we know that's going to be super challenging. So that's going to be the challenge of Darren and Matt, and primarily, and the reason I say that is, I think it was my timeline on my Twitter earlier today, 2 respectful tweets, but, and there's been a lot of them since we made the announcement, but these 2 in particular, they're special because they were right next to each other. One was right under the other. The bottom one said, forget about tabletop, just make a fun game, don't worry about this, that, and the other, just make a fun game. And the one right above it said, focus more on tabletop.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. It's very, very difficult. And so to everyone that's going to find value, so it's going to have to be a mix of things. And so that's where I think maybe there is a launching point for me to go into the new engine upgrade discussion. Now, it's still on the table. Okay, it's on the table. I'll officially say that it's on the table. Now, it might not, it's possible that it shouldn't be. And I'll explain. Number one, this is me only. Just acting as the CEO of the company, looking at the 5 years and trying to decide what might be of the most interest to the players, what might bring up the most interest and revenue generation and bring as much success back to the product as possible over the next 5 years without going and talking to any of my engineers or anyone. Okay? Now, obviously it's possible. We just shipped Mechwarrior 5 and Unreal 4. But keep in mind that Mechwarrior 5 is a single-player game with 4-player co-op. That co-op is done peer-to-peer with the main player playing host. So that means none of the code whatsoever is written in a client-server authoritative manner at all. There's some replication going on because of co-op, but there's no client-server authoritative aspects. So there is some significant differences in the gameplay, obviously being PvP, comp, stuff like that. Big differences in having none of the back-end database, none of the networking, none of the matchmaking. It'd be a monstrous effort. It would be, let's just say for the sake of conversation, it would be like let's call it like a 2-year development plan. Like let's say we had a 2-year plan. So like 2 years into this, you'd see that, and then you'd have still about 3 years of this kind of, at least minimum 3 years of this kind of new age looking Mechwarrior Online. So that might sound pretty good. This is where I get to in my head. But the truth is, even at that 2-year mark, you probably, think about how long has Mechwarrior Online been in development? Like people need to sit back sometimes and just think about this for a second and go, okay, friends and family, March, April 2012, 1 map, 4 mechs, 8v8, I think, or even 4v4, and that was it. And then you'd go on, but then if you think about it, it was like, then you'd get to the full 8v8 or 12v12. We had the entire private match lobby system. I'm trying to go in roughly the order we did stuff in, all the various game modes, all the maps, the entire private lobby system. That's not a small feature. These things are massive. The entire community warfare feature, whatever people think about it, love it, warts on it, but it's a monstrous, monstrous effort. And then
UI 2.0, I think, was in there somewhere.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to mention UI 2.0, Matt. That brings up bad feelings. No, but there you got that. And then you have Solaris. Solaris was a monstrous effort, which hasn't been very successful.
Nope.
Hindsight, I think I have my reasons. I'd love to talk about that too.
Okay.
But
I mean, even if you did this port, or not even port,
well,
you're basically building a game. Even if you're doing this and you don't change anything about the game, you're basically stuck with the same game, which just it looks prettier and it may perform a little bit better. I mean, really?
Yeah, so that's a good point. That's a good point. But to my point also is that 2-year time frame I gave, there's no way at the end of that 2-year time frame that you'd all of a sudden launch Mechwarrior Online with Unreal 4 and you would have all of those features. 100% of them, all converted into Unreal 4. That's either significantly longer than 2-year development, because you're talking about taking a 7+ years of development or whatever it's been and pushing it into 2 years. Sure, you've done it already, but so it would probably mean that initial release of Mechwarrior Online with Unreal 4 is not an entire feature set of what Mechwarrior Online is today. And no matter what I think of, say, the success of Solaris, and maybe I'd say, well, Solaris maybe doesn't have to be in it. There's a significant portion of the player base that would come out of the woodwork for sure, and rightfully say, well, I do play it.
Yeah.
And I did buy the Solaris pack. And you better believe it better all be there when the game releases.
Well,
so,
I own 600 mechs. They all better be there when you launch the product. I mean,
sure,
I paid
the
for
mechs
it, right?
probably wouldn't be a problem, but some of the features then I forgot about the comp mode that was added, like the comp queue. So the feature list now, if you sit back and write it all down and go, oh my goodness, like it is absolutely massive. So it would take a much bigger team. If you wanted to get it done in 2 years, we'd probably have to have a development team of like 60+, which means you're talking $10+ million in development or something, which we're not going to put into Mechwarrior Online because the game is just not generating anywhere close to that kind of revenue. So it probably means that conversation is, although it's still on the table, it's more difficult. It's much more difficult to contemplate a path there. It's probably smarter of us to think about, okay, fine, it's CryEngine 3, but still looks pretty good, and maybe we put some significant effort into optimization of the frame rate and whatnot, do what we can, talk about knockdowns and explore the concept of melee and come up with a really, really intriguing set of improvements and features and things that we can, AI systems, maybe get back onto that we kind of flirted with before Mechwarrior 5 started. There's a list, I think, that we could focus on. It would probably end up making much better use of our 5 years, and maybe it's, especially if we were able to maybe improve the performance level of the CryEngine 3 and work on those features, than trying to get really distracted with trying to upgrade to a new tech. And so those are just thoughts, and everything's still on the table, but sure, that's kind of where I'm coming from there.
Well, and hearing from it on my side, it's funny because I've talked about this in length. I made predictions that I said, I don't think it makes sense for them to continue working on MWO, and it makes sense if they've got a team to work on Mech 5. But now hearing what you were basically saying, and now that you guys have the extension, I can see also from that perspective, as far as what needs to be touched, and that's where you're basically asking the community, what would you do or what would you say? But you're also talking about prioritization. And like I mentioned this to Darren last night because we were talking about doing a podcast, and he said, I'll let you know. But one of the things I said is you may have to prioritize and say, maybe Solaris doesn't get worked on because it's not a priority right now, or faction play. But to me, there's some really cool things in faction play that I think a lot of people would like to see potentially in solo queue, like the respawn mechanic. We have it. That would be pretty cool, and or what about map design and getting, new maps, or maps that are already there, just need a little bit of love, and it'd go a long way. And I see a lot of stuff like low-hanging fruit, like spawn locations. That's one thing I've been harping about for a very long time that I feel like is low-hanging fruit that impacts the player base on a daily basis. And they're like, hey, this is really easy. Why don't you do this? When also we know like those changes were made to compete deathballing, but we know like deathballing is just it's a player behavior, safety in numbers. And so I see a lot of things like that, that is definitely low-hanging fruit that I think you can win a lot of favors with the community, including myself, of saying like, hey, yeah, we need to address those things. And some other like, not to keep going on a rant, but like, I still feel like skill tree is still very much a controversial thing where there were people that left and don't like it. And I feel like if that could be on the table, if people could, if you guys recognize that and say, yeah, you know what, we could do a better job, or like, I think let's hear some alternatives out there. What do you guys, what kind of proposals? And I think it would be very much, you're going to get inundated, and there's going to be, as Darren points out, you're going to have, I want my lore, or you mentioned this, Russ, but I want my lore, but then you have to make it fun. Well, I want my tabletop values. Well, then is this tabletop? Because in my opinion, it's not, and it can't be. You have to evolve. You have to look past some things. Yeah,
I think, just a quick comment on that. It's like, yeah, they're all on the table for sure. What I would caution is, in order for this, we'll call it an experiment. We're absolutely putting our efforts and our money where our mouth is. But of course, if the experiment fails, like meaning revenues don't climb at all, player counts don't climb, then obviously the experiment will not work out. I'm confident. I do think it'll work. Otherwise, wouldn't be here today. But so when we think of these things to do, we should be cautious that we're not just saying, skill tree I think is a pretty good example. It's like, you can change it and or revert or but it might be something that most people have adapted to it and have got to the point where maybe they're okay-ish with it. Maybe a few people did leave from it, but if you were to spend a significant amount of development time changing that or removing it or going back to what we had or some other combination is like a huge investment in time that may or may not have any overall impact on the actual player base size or revenue, because it's essentially making the same people a little happier, which is good, or at least some of them a little happier, which is good. But we should be, so maybe from a priority standpoint, it's not necessarily a low-hanging fruit that would have any kind of immediate, what we need is ideas that quickly show Piranha and the community collectively like, oh God, this is working, great. Numbers are getting higher, revenues are picking up, Piranha's getting more and more confident in spending and pushing, for 5 years on Mechwarrior Online. So those are the ideas we need, at least to start. You can kind of intermix some of the other things in.
Sure. So you're talking about quality of life stuff, and then just bang, big bang for your.
Like, look, so we can't sell people more mechs. Oh, we can, and maybe I'm sure there will be more mechs. But like, just maybe examples would be, well, if there was a melee mechanic, then that could be fun. It has its challenges around it, but let's say we went that way. What does that mean for the game as far as new monetization opportunities or whatever? Well, not a lot. I mean, it means you can't put in Hatchet Man or something and sell a few different mechs, but maybe it doesn't impact things a lot. So what are some ideas that almost affect the whole game? Something that affects the entire game, that improves the game, makes it funner, but also creates another element that kind of lays on top of everything. That maybe there is no idea like that, but that'll be the challenge, I think.
Yeah. Well, one of the things
this definitely highlights the challenge of this situation. Like I said in the beginning, I'm super encouraged. I'm super excited. I love the fact that everything's on the table all the way up to updating the engine. But I'm hoping people are understanding the challenge of this situation and the diversity of a very passionate community that can, stand on total opposite ends of each subject matter or whatever. And just trying to take all that, huge wealth of information and suggestions that have already been coming in big time, and sorting through that and trying to make the changes, like Russ said, that are not only going to improve the game and potentially bring people back. I've got a ton of comments that are just like, prove me wrong, bring me back, and they're dropping the gauntlets, and it's a challenge, and I love that. I would love to bring people back, but obviously it's got to make sense on all levels. It's got to be something that the players can immediately feel the impact from, enjoy, make the game better, tell their friends, and also on the opposite end, continue bringing in revenue, whether that's just our normal, sources of revenue that exist now, but it increases because there's more people playing, or because we, establish something completely new. I'm excited about the possibility.
Well, if you look at, what's your day-to-day interaction? That's gameplay. That's being in game. So like, that's the first thing that hops out to me is like, to get people back, it's what does that mean for their day-to-day experience? Because that's what they're doing. They're shooting mechs. They spend some time in the mech lab, so that's a part. I feel like mechs is the central thing to there. And we've talked obviously balance quite a bit in the past years, being involved with it and so forth. And like you mentioned, bringing mechs back. One of the things that I feel like, and it probably impacted, this is hypothetical for me, impacted sales was the fact of mechs came out and they just didn't perform versus mechs that were already out, or they came out and they were too damn good. Looking at you, Kodiak 3, stuff like that. And because of that, a nerf had to happen, and then that affects the bottom dollar. And if it doesn't sell and so forth, that affects you guys putting out new content as well, right? So I feel like Mechs is a central figure to where, gameplay has to be in there. And one of the things, I've been a proponent for this forever, and it was sort of done to some mechs, but like rescale, I feel like could have huge implications for gameplay. And like every single mech, literally every single mech in the game, people would buy or spend money on mechs maybe they didn't before, because now that mech is in a better place. So I feel like that's something too, if you guys haven't looked at, potentially too, is actual rescale, because the bigger a target is.
We did a whole rescale. So, and believe it or not, no, trust me. When we did that rescale, the pure volumetric rescale was what was demanded of us. Then we did a pure volumetric rescale, and then it was like, oh god, these lights are huge. And then people maybe realized like, oh, we want it scaled differently.
Yes.
So that's fair. I mean, yeah, I'd look at that again, of course.
I'm not saying volumetric. I'm saying is like a mech's performance is based on a few categories, right? And one of the detriments, like a direwolf should be scary as shit, but the problem is, we live in a pinpoint game that's not tabletop.
Oh,
so,
no,
right?
I'm just saying. Remember, at the time, we were catching a lot of. The heat we were catching was because, for example, the scale. So the Stalker in particular, way back when, was like the best medium mech in the game. Because it was, 85 ton. It was tiny, and so the push then was, this is ridiculous. We need to get everything perfectly. Remember, the one guy had like the pixel image of side, front, perfect volumetric scaling. And we did mathematical scripts to get volumetric scaling. And then we put that in, and then it probably did improve a bunch of stuff. But then I think there was a lot of side effects too, where the little ones then were like getting worked over.
I bring this up so much because maybe it is hindsight. Maybe it is just knowing. I mean, when you guys had 4 mechs, you didn't know scale was going to be a big problem for balance. I mean, quirks came in because of inadequacies of chassis. I mean, and when I talk about scale, I'm talking about like, the problem is we have this weird equation into tonnage to size when that isn't necessarily true. You can show 2 different cars the same size, but one's heavier than the other. So it's just one of those where, like, gameplay wise, I feel like rescale.
Yeah, this should be scaled based on their power.
Yeah, and if an Atlas, the problem I see is like the Atlas and so forth, they should be scary, but the problem is they're so big. You can be pinpoint accurate against that torso. Well, why can't you do that against the flea and stuff if it's zipping around and doing that? It's because it's smaller. It is harder to hit. So I feel like that's big implications. I know that's that may be small, but like as far as I feel like has a wide range of stuff. But so this all being said, what steps between this conversation now and you guys actually moving forward and stuff, like what is that going to look like? Are we going to have multiple podcasts or road maps? Is this where you're going to be putting out a post and asking for feedback? Because we're covering multitude of things. We're covering monetization. We're covering gameplay. We're covering map design and stuff like that. I mean, where do you see this conversation going with the community, or at least how would you like to get the ball rolling on that?
I think, Darren and I are going to like basically catalog the game, and just to your example there, one of the things that haven't been brought up yet is engine desync, and I saw that mentioned on the forums the other day too, right? So there's all kinds of changes that have come and gone in the game that people liked it better before, liked it better after, that kind of thing. So we've got to do a bit of an autopsy. Darren and I have to listen to the fans, and we have to go and look at what are the pieces of the puzzle that we have, and it's a big puzzle. So we got to disassemble it a little bit and assign value to things, and look at, and even dig into the metrics, like what are people playing, what are people buying and using, and what modes do they spend the most time in, and those kind of things. So we're going to do a bit of forensic autopsy of where we are, how we got to here, and assign value to those things, and see what the player feedback is, and kind of try and build a new picture out of some of these pieces and see where it is we want to focus that time and you know, and all the whole time while engaging with the community and talking about that. I mean, Darren and I have talked about this a little bit, and I you know, want you to jump in here, Darren, as well, since you're going to be spearheading it. But really, we look at it as, you know, there's all these options, and there's so many different things, levers and dials and things you can pull just on the game as it exists right now. And we've proven that over the last little while with the PSR changes and
By the way,
changes and stuff like that. Like,
I don't think it's been given enough credit. I think you guys did great with the PSR changes, as far as like, you guys said, hey, we're merging the group in solo, we're doing this. You did a test. Everyone felt like it was probably going to happen because, you know, but you did it. And then you said, hey, we're going to do zero sum. Your community basically said, hey, that's not exactly what we were talking about. You guys came back and said, hey, what are your suggestions? And I just want to say that was one of the best, like, back and forth with the community, I feel, communication wise, that's been done in the past, like, you know, 2 years. And I feel like you guys didn't get enough credit for that because of course people will say, well, it should have been done 5 years ago. Well, that wasn't on your mind 5 years ago. It was on your mind right now. So it's one of those where I think it added value to the communication, and that I can't stress is what I think a lot of people say. Yes, we love that you guys work with us, we work with you, and we come up with a solution that is benefiting everyone, right?
Yeah, and I think we want to build on that kind of communication and even take it up a few notches as far as, you know, what we're going to be working on here now. And the funny thing is, I did get a couple people commenting negatively on the PSR thing, but you know, that is the community, right? We have a very passionate and strong beliefs in what they like and don't like. But I as far as, you know, where we're going right now and what's going to be happening, it's going to take a week or two to kind of get ramped up. Matt and I in the background have already started, you know, developing the methods of kind of tracking this stuff, and we will be doing that over the next couple of weeks. Essentially, you know, it's like coming into a game and taking the Wikipedia and going, okay, here's everything that exists in this game, and it's all on the table. And so, you know, and as we get that set up and established over the next couple of weeks, we'll start to reach out to the community and figure out the best methods of that communication and continuing the communication on a weekly basis so that everybody knows what's going on. I totally agree. I love the way the PSR thing happened, and I want to see more of that, and even more so.
So I want to jump in here too, because I think it's important to set expectations. You know, I think so the idea is that Mechwarrior Online will get a dedicated development team again. And obviously we're starting to build that team right now, like Darren's on it, and like, I don't know how big it'll get, but obviously, again, I have to do this, and I know people will, you know, maybe attack me for just talking about the business side, but I'm the CEO of the company, and numbers talk, and we can't pay for a development team unless we found stuff that can monetize. So, and we're not even in with an 8-year-old game, we're not even really in a position to just say, well, let's just do all this stuff for 2 years and let's see if, you know, things get better. Well, you know, and then maybe we'll do some more. So when we're talking about these ideas, we have to come up with some type of a, like in the past, it was always a mech pack, right? It was like Phoenix or Resistance, and it made some sense because when you launched the clans, you had the clan packs. When you launched the 30, 60, whatever year we got up to, whatever it was, you know, there was all that technology run, so there was a pack there, and there was a way to kind of do that. Now, one, that's been kind of, you know, everyone has so many mechs, so even if there was another idea like that, maybe there will be some mechs involved, but we have to come up with a list of updates. And some of it can just be quality of life stuff, of course. Some of it can just be like fixes. But of course, in the end, we're not going to get into a situation where we're just trying to charge people money for, like, you know, what people would rightfully say, like just like a bug fix or something. Yeah. Has to be some substantial feature. But see, Solaris is one of those that really was, you know, not successful as far as the size and scope of that feature and the work it took to develop it and ship it. for the investment of dollars, and it just didn't make sense. So we need to have a really smart feature set, but something that we can come up with, something that can package it all together and sort of a, you know, a Redux or like this title mentality of like, here's the plan, and we're going to do all these things, and it has a roadmap, and there's a way for players to show their support for that set of features so that we can build a development team around it and develop it. So yeah, it is going to take a little bit for these guys to get engaged in the community, but I think it'll definitely be a lot of back and forth. I know the community often says, hey, just give us a council and we'll just design the game. Well, I'm not going to go that far, but honestly, if you look at the PSR stuff, it wasn't far off of that. So it'll be similar, I imagine. Yeah.
Okay. So I have a question for you directly, Russ. What is something that you would want to see in MWO? Or is, yeah, I think that's a fair question. What is something that you would like to see in MWO change, altered, new? What is something on your wish list that you've never quite got, or maybe it just needs to be in there? You can take your time. I feel like that's
pack or something.
I feel like, and by the way,
I've got one.
Go ahead,
More
Matt.
players.
No. Being the event guy, right? I've always wanted to have an event queue. Not only an event queue, but I've wanted to have an event queue where I could do stupid shit. Where it could be like, hey, it's Irby's double speed, like with super fast ballistic or something. Like just stuff where I could just have, like, it's a fun event. It turns it on for the weekend, and you could just, people go, oh, I'm gonna go drop in the silly event queue, and everybody gets an Irby with super, like, one setup or something, or like just rules, or like mediums only or something like that. Just a queue where I can set up the rules for X amount of time. So that's something I've always wanted in MWO.
What about you, Darren?
I will also say Matt is full of a lot of really good ideas. He has some crazy.
And full of what, Darren?
Your eyes are brown. Why is that?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but he's got a lot of cool ideas like that. As far as me, I mean, that is a really tough question.
Be honest, it's not like your boss is here. It's
not at all. No, I honestly, nothing is coming to mind. I mean, I got
Crusader
the mechs that I wanted. I mean, if you want to fill out the rest of the unseen mechs or whatever, but really, there's so many mechs, right? And I love that. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about it. As far as one specific thing, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the rest of the unseens could. I mean, it's not like we're saying, hey, man, there's no reason to put out any more mechs. I mean, yeah, we could still put out some mechs. Why not? Of course.
There's new tech you could jump to.
Yeah, or even some unseens that maybe don't have new tech, but people still like them. It has been a while, so there'd be maybe some pent up demand there. So I think there's something to that. For me, honestly, and I think a lot of people would like me saying this, I just don't know for sure how we'd accomplish it because we have matchmaker challenges. But for me, I think what's resonated the most with me is around community warfare. Like, I do wish, that's an old term, I guess, faction play. I do wish that there was a way to make it more long-term, guild tag, clan tag, method of fighting over territory and such. But everyone, the challenges there are pretty well documented. I mean, in lieu of scheduled matches, meaning you have to rely on the matchmaker to find it in that moment, and whoever's online could take advantage of the system. That's one of the biggest challenges. And then, of course, just the best players teaming up easily dominate in our game compared to maybe others. So I think that would take some sort of like a scheduled, almost like compute, but even further, almost like a scheduled.
Like a scheduled event? Like a
yeah,
event?
Well, it's like a scheduled match. So like you're playing faction play, but it's like everyone can form their houses and groups and clans and whatever you want to call it, and then go about it. But it's not like a real-time thing that whoever's playing. It's more of a 8 p.m. on a Friday. So I'm problem solving at the same time. So I'll stop problem solving because I've been through those like probably 20 different 7-hour meetings in the boardroom over the last.
I was going to say we've had these meetings.
Yeah, I mean, it is unbelievably complex. I went out to say, hey, just make it like Battletech 3025. Well, okay. I wish I had all those meetings recorded. And you say we've thought about all of it, but yeah, that's something. My mind goes there, sort of achieving like something that isn't just a round. You know, like a round of MW was really fun. Even a round of faction play in the peak best moments of faction play was pretty great. You know, you got your 4 respawns and got a really competitive match that went essentially 48 versus 48 and came down to the last few mechs. Probably the pinnacle in my mind of like when we had a few of those matches kicking off at the peak of faction play. When faction play first launched, it was pretty well thought of for like that initial month, right? It was like, oh my God, this is so fun. And then, you know, just got consumed so fast. And then maybe the warts started to pop out because people could, you know, game through it and chew up the territory. But it was close, you know, it just felt like, oh, there's just not enough players quite to pull this off. Or, you know, we have all of our players in 3 different, you know, server time zones, and it's just there was just these things that were just keeping us from just quite hitting the nail on the head to make it truly just, you know, what people wanted. So I know there's a good number of people out there that would immediately talk about faction plays, just make faction play like you originally intended, which honestly is kind of there's no really way of knowing what was originally intended, because honestly, this is well documented mistake, but when Brian Ekman was with the company and he, in the beginning of the game, he basically just wrote up a paragraph on like one of the pillars of it and then people just read that paragraph and just immediately created in their mind exactly what that experience was, and everyone did it all over the place, and we had it was a mistake. Obviously, we didn't control that mind experiment at all. Yeah. So when it came time to create faction plays, like we had people realizing like they wanted like a 10-year MMO kind of like, you know. So that was.
I remember that speech
probably
too.
the biggest mistake. Yeah.
I remember that speech.
That was the biggest mistake involved. Yeah. But now that we are where we are, faction play to me was just so close a couple times, you know. But it was mostly came down to limitations on. Buckets and stuff.
Would you consider, I mean, talking about, I think this might be a little squirrel point, but let's talk about group and solo queue being merged, and you guys did PSR adjustments. How have you guys seen that? Have you been happy with the results? And
people can have their opinions on it, but there's no doubt about it. From a matchmaking perspective, it's with the current population levels, it's just significantly better.
Okay. Now, that being said, how do you feel about, and I really like this statement when you guys were going through, I remember because Darren can quote me on this, I used to say the ability for groups to control the outcome of matches, and it was almost like someone took my quote and shoved that in the paragraph, but I was so glad hearing that. How do you still feel like there's some balance to do there? Because one of the things that I liked with this change is you basically put your foot down and said the game needs this to happen, and it outweighs somewhat of the players' want and need to have these massive groups. And I remember having a conversation with you on the podcast about that a few times. Like were people out there that said, if you take away my groups, I'm going to stop playing. And it's like, well, now the game needs those smaller groups. How do you feel about that as far as the balance between a group and solo? And do you feel like there needs to be any adjustments there?
Based on current population levels, no, I don't. I'm willing to put it on the table, but that's just facts. It's just the way it is. And honestly, I think that if there was a mistake made, it probably was made many years ago when there was a bit of a fight going on with the community when we were going. Remember it existed in a pretty decent state, separated for a while. So I guess maybe that's not necessarily true, but there was a time when we limited the groups before we separated them down to like, I think 2 or 3 or something like that. Not that it necessarily had to be that, but the demands were like, if I can't play with 12 of my friends, I'm done. And we caved, and maybe that's a wrong word when you're giving your community what they want, but It's possible that was the wrong decision, even going way back then. I mean, if you look at a game like World of Tanks, even to this day, essentially you're limited to platoons of 2 or 3, I believe.
Three, yeah.
3 if you have premium accounts. So, and that's with the
15 man.
15 per side. So those are done for reasons. And I think, you never know for sure. If we'd have done something like that, maybe it would have kept higher populations in the main matchmaker longer, which would have helped the game grow in its key moments earlier on. You never know for sure. It's hard to say, but I don't think we can possibly go to expanding the groups. We can't expand the group size while it's combined.
Sure.
It has too much impact, for sure. And we can't separate it out again unless the population base doubles, probably, at least. So I think at the moment it kind of is the best we can do.
Yeah. No, I was more talking about like the current stance of right now a 2, 3, and 4 man group. I think if you potentially, and I guess this is just my opinion, and there's thousands of other people out there, but like it'd be an interesting question for me to ask the community. Would be like, because I've talked to a lot of players, and how I look at it is, if it can be abused, it will be abused. And if you do have good players out there that are dropping in a 4 man and they're just wrecking all day and night, can you put limiters? Should it be a 4 man? Why not go down to a 3 man? And it's a weird, right? We got this weird tonnage system, and just because it's a 20-ton mech doesn't mean it can't take out a 100-ton mech. And you do have a difficult problem there compared to World of Tanks.
You're 100% right. And this, I think we can all say with 100% certainty. And anyone who disagrees with this probably is just trying to push what they want, because they're worried that what they like will go away. If you limited the group size to 3, would the matches get more competitive overall on average? Yes. If you limited it to 2 only, would they become even more competitive overall on average? Yes, they would. I think that's a fact, because groups are that powerful in our game. That's a fact. So obviously we're living with a certain amount by staying at 4 at the moment. If the community came to like overwhelming consensus that all that mattered was match quality, and they wanted to reduce it to 3, I think absolutely it would improve the quality of the matches. I don't think it's really arguable.
Okay. All right.
Competitiveness, right?
Yeah, no,
for sure. It's just it is 100% is what it is. But
yeah, and
I think
funny.
this.
Go ahead, Darren.
Well, I was just going to say, I think this highlights the challenge of the situation here, because you've got something that's a highly opinionated topic, but also then there's just the data and the facts, and so there's that whole what the players want, but then also what they don't know that they want, or they don't realize the consequences perhaps. And that's very challenging, especially when we're coming right now to the community to say, what do you want? And sometimes those things might have unknown or unseen consequences. And so, like I said, it's an enormous challenge here, but we're up to the task. But obviously there's issues, right?
Well, I mean, like I said, I felt like that was a pertinent topic, because PSR, group, and solo, I haven't really been able to talk to you guys since, so that's gone out. Obviously, as you said, that's on the table. Whether tonnage, I'm assuming, is on the table, whether how many people are in a group is on the table, and that's good to hear. And it'd be great to hear from everybody out there too, because as you guys are sort of saying. So this is a really good conversation, because basically what you're saying is everything's on the table. You want to move forward. You, on one hand, obviously, Russ, you're basically saying is the game, we want to invest time, we want to invest money, but we got to be smart about it. So you want basically the largest impact on the community out there, getting players back, or people spending money. It's going to be interesting seeing what people come up with, because I'm an idiot. Like I just, I can't, there's certain things that I'm like, no, but I think it's going to be a great conversation out there. Do you guys already have anything that you're like, yeah, we want to, you mentioned new players experience or anything. Is there anything that's already you guys have agreed on that you can talk about right now? Is there anything like, because obviously it's still early on, but I didn't know how long this conversation's been going on. So,
well, I will say before Russ interjects with specifics, that everything that we've talked about so far, we've talked about behind the scenes, and a lot more. There's ideas that people are sending via all the channels, that are great ideas, but pretty much nothing that we haven't thought about, or at least the initial stages of thinking about. So I love the fact that we're sitting here with a clean slate and the ability to think about everything. But go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, no, I don't have a lot to add. I think it's just all on the table for now, and I might just reiterate the points. But I think again, I think we need to find a way to support the effort. So again, I kind of go back to to all the lore hounds out there, like the big ones we've done. The clan launch. We've done that. The next technology release. What do we call that one with the big technology update? Come on, Darren, you would know. Or Phil.
I know.
Google.
Weapons and
weapons and technology. You're all the big nerds are just eating us alive right now.
Yeah, all the
Okay. But and then we had Solaris.
Civil War.
Civil War.
Civil War escalation.
Yeah,
Civil
Civil
War.
War. Okay.
Thank you.
And that went up to a certain year. So, we've done a lot, but there is other stuff. So, for example, knockdowns or melee or things that are in the game, I know they don't necessarily relate to any particular year or expansion pack or technology level. They're just things that can happen in the game normally. But they could be bundled up with some type of an idea, right? So it could be just possibly as a really bad example, because I have never played Mechwarrior Battletech tabletop or anything in this Jihad era stuff. I know nothing about it. So I'm just using it as an conversational example of Jihad or whatever, you have a thing. So that's okay, that gives us access to technology, gives us access to mechs, but also at the same time, we can use this as an opportunity in this development cycle that we're now funding to get to work on, say, knockdowns or melee attacks, and I don't know, death from above, all sorts of things. Maybe introduce new PVE elements. So there can be features that aren't necessarily related to the subject matter, but can be still worked in as features as part of that subject matter to create an actionable plan that we can present to the community. Here it is. Here's all the features inside of it. Do you love this? Oh, that's great. Let's go. So it's going to be a lot harder to come up with that than I just made it sound like. But
understood.
Yeah.
And of course, like you said, you don't want to gate what should just be normal features. If it's a new map, it can't be gated.
Yeah. So maybe that's a good segue into some Mechwarrior 5 stuff. So for example, there could be a total free update aspect of it. So for Mechwarrior 5, which I guess this isn't even official yet, so I might as well make it official. Because every once in a while someone asks me and I go, isn't that official? And apparently it's not. So December 10th of this year, Mechwarrior 5 will release on Steam and GOG.
There you go. It's official now. Well, we knew.
So it's not official.
Yeah, Alex.
It was going to be announced on Friday, Russ.
Yeah, Alex. Well, Alex said it was, and Chris. Well, Chris and Alex. Well, there you go.
That's okay. Our community gets stuff earlier.
There you go.
True.
Chris and Alex did confirm via you guys that it was going on Steam. We just didn't have a date, so now December 10th,
right?
Which is the anniversary. Yeah. So that's
it's a 12-month exclusivity period. So whether there's what time did we release? It was early in the morning, so technically at the same time in the morning on the same day. Absolutely. So but the reason I wanted to bring that up, and this will probably go live before Friday, but that's okay. Our community gets information. That announcement will go broader, perhaps. So basically, what we have there is there's obviously the standard game is going to Steam and GOG, but we also have DLC 1. I'll just call it that for now. Still, that's our
Heroes of the Inner Sphere. No date as far as that has been done yet.
So I guess actually I think I stole the thunder from that other.
There's still one announcement you haven't said from the other one, so that's fine.
Whatever. So DLC 1, right? We'll just call it that for now, and it's first off, it's massive. It's probably at least twice as big as any DLC has a right to be. But still going to be priced at, I believe, it's still going to be priced at a $19.99 price point. So it's going to be huge.
That's a first. So you're thinking $20 basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
US
there's
dollars,
also
probably.
so of course this is a US podcast. Then there's a free update for the game, and so the standard edition of the game gets a free update, and the free update's huge. Like it's probably as big as the DLC. Like it's just massive. All sorts of stuff we fixed, improved, and then in particular the first hour of the game and the intro stuff, and there's a whole bunch of improvements, and all that's going in as a free update. So you'll have the standard edition of the game, highly updated and improved and tweaked, the big giant DLC for $19.99, and then we'll have a bundled type edition, of course, that kind of has the both together. So, yeah, I think my main message there is like these games don't compete with each other. You know, like Mechwarrior 5 will never have PvP, so there's no reason to kind of choose a side. And I have seen that a little bit, and I think now hopefully if we're saying, hey, Mechwarrior Onlines is going to get development time, not only will people say that's amazing, but they might feel like they can let the guard down and play Mechwarrior 5 and enjoy it. And if they want to wait till the Steam release, that's wonderful. Whatever, it's all good. And then lastly, I think would be we're also gonna. Now's not the time because right now Mechwarrior Online is the priority. But at some point, Darren and the team will completely engage the community as well on like, what do you want to see in future DLC packs? Obviously, this December is already locked and loaded. April would be partially loaded. April, it's an estimate, but you can think of we fully intend on releasing at least a couple different, at least 2 DLCs we hope per year on Mechwarrior 5 as well, and then maybe even something at Christmas. So, and that's a 5-year plan of like content. You know, there could be a full, of course, obviously there could be a full, really big, almost sequel-sized DLC that deals with the clans. Obviously, it's not like I'm going to be like, oh my God, Russ and clans. It's like, that's like the most obvious thing I could possibly say. So we're going to want we want to know what people want there too. It's like, well, what do you want in Mechwarrior 5? What would you spend money on? What would you buy? What do you want? You want clans? Yeah. Is that the biggest thing for you? And you know, and just try not to bleed over too. A lot of people say, well, I want PvP, or like, you know, let's try to keep the game separate. I think that benefits Mechwarrior. If you're protective of Mechwarrior Online, then let's be protective of it. Mechwarrior Online is what it is. It's a PvP free-to-play game. Let it be the PvP game. Let Mechwarrior Online be the single-player game. Let it be the mod game. And again, don't bring up mods over here necessarily too, because the complexity of the client-server environment and trying to get player-made maps is almost impossible.
With that being said,
okay, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say. With that being said, though, would you like? That's another thing. Maps, though. I feel like you said obviously you can't open it up to mod. That's just not how it works. But players submitted ideas and themes, or like if a layout of a map and stuff. That, I mean, could that be something that, because one of the things
it just has to be developed into at some point it just needs to be adopted as an official map that gets put into the game. Sure. Yeah, of course. How we get there doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But again, the workload and effort just to get the Mechwarrior 5 Unreal 4 tools to the community is a massive effort, and that's with an engine that's used to being put out as a mod tools. Yeah. CryEngine and trying to put a mod tool pack together for our customer base is going to be like an investment that we don't want to waste time on. We could waste a year that we could be improving the game. Yeah.
Well, I will say, sort of side note too, Darren, I mentioned this multiple times. I'll tell you what would sell for MWO, sound packs. I'll tell you that would, you know, Haven Kendrick his sound pack is one of the most used out there. And if you guys can monetize different fun stuff like that, I'm just saying those are little things.
It's also something that has been and could be modded too, right? So you sell a mod pack and it's basically a download that could easily be shared amongst the community. I think that's one of the reasons that we haven't done that in the past.
Sorry, Matt, it's run over top of you, but the mod pack, as you guys know, causes all kinds of problems with when the game updates, and then there's crashes that are happening. It's not us trying to prevent the mod pack per se. It's just like the way that it works in the client server database environment, it causes all kinds of problems. So I think you're right. Maybe that is a really great idea.
Something
I
we
just
can
wanted
certainly
to say, I actually have to, this sucks, but I actually have to go pick up my kids from school here. But I did want to say, Russ, there was one detail that Russ did leave out of this Friday announcement, along with the DLC and the Steam and stuff launch. So you guys should go check out RazorCon. We've got a little video that Darren and I put together that's going to play at some point during the massive. Well, okay, you helped me. You're in it too. So yeah, you guys can check that out. And there is a really cool reveal in that about something related to Mechwarrior 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I can come back, but
yeah, just leave your camera. Just leave that on.
I'm gonna leave it on.
Leave it. Yeah, just leave it on. Just don't walk around naked.
Because
I'm not gonna edit that out.
I forget.
Yeah. See.
No, I think I'll probably have to.
So I will be back.
Yep.
Okay.
Now his kids will just walk up.
So I mean, yeah, like I told you, look, I mean, from a modder's perspective, okay, so we sort of dove into Mechwarrior 5. Our Mech Commander project, we've actually just been waiting for the DLC to drop because some of the plans that we have, like right now, you can play our Mech Commander Mercenaries. That's what it's called, and it's just Mechwarrior 5 and RTS perspective, and we got a few other things like reinforcements and stuff. But really, where we want to start distinguishing us between just Mech 5 has to do with like the missions and changing missions and. Well, we have to wait for the DLC, and we're trying not to gate it. But the reality of it is like we're wanting to utilize the quirk system because we already had thoughts on that. We already had thoughts on changing the mission structure, and you guys are introducing a new mission. So I'm looking forward to the DLC, and from, of course, selfishly from a modder's perspective, and the mod scene has been. Really busy behind the scenes. I think one of the biggest hindrances, and it's something I talked to Alex, was there was just no documentation. There was no, we have a like starting guide, but that's one thing that like the community just started a wiki. I don't know if people are aware of that too, where stuff like, hey, you want to create a new weapon? Just follow these steps, right? Because you hop into Unreal and it's pretty intimidating if you've never been in there. And that's another thing is people always ask like, well, how do I get involved? And it's like, well, you have to learn Unreal. Like you have to hop in there. You have to understand the nuances, but that's just not being documented, I think has been it's definitely slowed the progress, and the community is starting to take steps towards, fixing that, because I feel like some of the big stuff, apparently there's like 1 or 2 teams out there that's doing like storyline and campaign stuff. We haven't seen really anything yet, so we'll see. But there's already people doing mechs. I'm surprised no one's done a clan mechs yet, but we knew that was probably
going to some images, right? Of some clan.
Yeah, we've seen a few. Yeah. So.
Yeah, on the one hand, I've tried to be as transparent as I possibly could about what our plans are, because I don't want anyone to necessarily waste cycles. I don't want to waste their time, and if we're going to be doing it and we're going to release it similar to when they would get done the work, then they might as well spend their time on other stuff. Sure. So that they can make the best mods possible. And none of that comes from like a, more of a competition type standpoint. Honestly, I could care less. If they want to release anything they want and have it be super rad, I think that's awesome. I don't think it would probably, none of that stuff would affect our plans when it comes to DLC. Like there's a vast majority of players out there that just aren't going to get into downloading mods. So for us, even if someone put out a mod that was all the clan mechs or whatever, wouldn't affect our plans probably doing a full official clan DLC, and almost certainly. The only things that it would affect us on, like I think the Mech Lab mods and these kind of things, I think that's great. We're not going to probably get involved in those areas. It's like let people use the mods. I don't want to stomp on people's work too. Like let them have that, own that, keep that glory forever. This game is crap unless you put this guy's Mech Lab mod on it. That's great. That's wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot to come there, and I think the whole Epic Games Store thing, plus people's anxiety around Mechwarrior Onlines has probably done a disservice to Mechwarrior 5. I mean, the game itself, I know this community in particular being fairly hardcore, used to a Mechwarrior Online style Mech Lab and so on and so forth, that they didn't cozy up to it as much as others perhaps. But in the end, and we talked about this a bit on the drunk night, I think, overall the review scores were very, very good, and they were they were very close to what we set out to accomplish. I wanted to hit an 80% reviewed game. This day and age in 2019, 2020, that is not many games, and especially for a studio our size. And in the end, the Metacritic average ended up more around mid-7, like 75 or something. But our PC Gamer, IGNs, all the bigger guys gave us our 80 to 85% review scores, which ended up being anywhere from 10 to 15% higher on average than Mechwarrior Online was. So I think a lot of decisions we made, even though they don't necessarily sit perfectly well with the core MWO community, seem to be the right decisions for a single-player game, going out, making an attempt to capture a bigger market. And then the beautiful thing, it has mod support. So like the guys that want a certain mech lab or certain functionality can get that still. So I think, as we move forward, there's just so much unexplored. Canadian Video Game Awards, which is obviously a tiny award show compared to many, believe it or not, as people will snicker a little bit because a lot of people gave shit to this aspect of the game, but best narrative. So
I saw that one. I saw it because like
I would have picked almost any other category for us to be
in the quote. Yeah, in the quote it had you saying, "Yeah, we're not very good with story." And I remember like that was actually one of the things that I think we brought up in a pod. Like you said, like yeah, we need to improve on that. And
Mechwarrior 5 was a huge. That was our first effort at getting better at it because trust me, we had to hire a very expensive narrative writer, and we did what we could in the middle of this game development to enhance our abilities to put at least that much of the story in to achieve what we did. And that was originally, I remember, Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries grew significantly from its initial announcement. It was really thought of almost more as just a contract simulator, and certainly you can see that loop in
you can see
core of Mechwarrior 5, of course. But quite a bit, whether it's co-op and all, the story elements that are there and the story campaign and all that was added on, and it worked out pretty well, and I think, so it was our first big step at getting better at characters and story, and paid off to some degree. But then since then, so far in 2020, we haven't just stopped. Like we've continued. We've now hired dedicated, character artists and character animators. And the studio itself as a whole has gotten significantly better, even in character stuff.
Sorry, Fahad just makes me just, oh man, yeah. Fix Fahad now. That's actually, I mean, I've always been very honest. Like as far as the story, I have no problem with the story in Mechwarrior 5. I could just tell that was a definitely tacked on part to what you were talking about, which is the cycle of just being a mercenary, going to do contracts. And to me, it was one of those things that could be improved, hands down. And then you, of course, said that as well. I think either it was on a podcast. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, I think what I said was it's tough to go beyond that because even if you look at BattleTech, and BattleTech gets maybe a little more props in this area, but at the same time, I remember when it was released, it kind of took some beatings too because it was just, the static guys there and similar, and that's for a reason. And the reason is, of course, to go from that or what we had to that next level is basically one of the most expensive things in game development. I mean, you think about games today, you either get The Last of Us, this is a massive oversimplification of my point, but you get The Last of Us, or you get, almost no character story. It's like, because when you crack that egg, and we tried to just kind of crack that a little bit and slip in some characters.
If you're not good at it.
Yeah.
Well,
and you have to go all the way. Is my point.
Well, and I think to clarify, I don't have a problem with the story in Mech 5. Like the dialogue narrative, by the way, I think quests are great. They're sort of like the flashpoints in BattleTech, and I think that's great. I think from my standpoint, it was, if you were to narrow it down to a word, it would be storytelling. How the story was presented to the player. In HBS, they did a great job with the 2D art movement, and you could go and talk to the characters and, what would you like to know? They gave you a little bit of narrative back, and I felt like if that would have been like, it was just very surface. You walk up to Fahad, you didn't understand why he talked like that. you know, Rihanna. You want a little bit more interaction with the crew, and I feel like that was probably from the storytelling perspective, and I think that's a fair, like, that's what they did really well. And then the storytelling was just very, I would say, like, it was just shallower. And like you said, it's because you have to go all in, or it shows.
Well, especially for us, because, you know, it was a full first person, you know, action game, and you're physically walking around the hangar and you're physically seeing the characters, and, you know, it wasn't just a static camera, and then you have so it was, yeah, it's a much bigger can to open when you go in there. So I was actually pleasantly surprised that we got what we did to the level we got it in when we shipped. You know, when you think about the just the effort just even to get to that level was more than I thought we were going to get in, maybe like a year and a half off from launch. But at any rate, yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and then if you know, again, you guys had a little bit of an edge too when you look at like BattleTech came out, but HPS went through the same things. I mean, I think some people forget that, like their launch, performance issues they had, the gameplay, it was the same missions over and over, which again, you know, it's the same sort of thing with Mech 5, working in new game mode, the redundancy, the sort of spawns and stuff, the same things. And you didn't get flashpoints for some time. And I feel like a lot of people tend to sort of gloss over that.
It was about 9 months now. Maybe they released in April. Maybe they had it by that late that fall. Yeah. So a little quicker, but that's because we're in a bit of a different situation with the Epic Games Store exclusivity, and there's obviously there's a lot of reasons for us to just, you know, wait for the Steam launch to make it as big of a thing as possible. So that content got held just a little bit longer than, you know, than it maybe necessarily had to be, but that's also given us an opportunity to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And
I feel like
we had COVID.
Well, and I feel like it sort of highlights too is like some people would jump on the wagon and basically say, I love Mech 5. There was literally people in chat that were like, I've already got like 600 plus hours in here. They like that loop. They like the, you know.
I love it. I mean, obviously I was the product director, so that's obvious that people can, you know, see my hand in it, so to speak, because you can see the initial announcement in MechCon 2016 and the interviews we gave to PC Gamer then and stuff like that. If you go back and read those things, that was my original vision that I had, and I'm fairly happy with how that vision ended up at the end. So that was my idea of it too, and I do like it as well. Like, I mean, I think it's a blast. I think so many aspects of it, the destructibility of the cities and stuff is really impressive that people are missing out on. If they were holding out for Steam, fair enough. Again, I don't care. If you want to buy it when Steam comes out, that's wonderful. But certainly if you were holding out because, oh no, I'm a Mechwarrior Online guy and I just can't be part of Team Mechwarrior 5, whatever. Oh, don't do that. That's just missing out on I think, a really fun game. And based on the reviews and everything else, I think it sits very nice and firmly in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arc. And sometimes our rose-colored glasses can distort things, but it is a really exceptional game. It sits in there nicely. Like, you can reinstall Mechwarrior 2. And I think we've talked about this before, but like, what's the best game right now of the single-player games just to go play? Well, for me, yeah, it's Mechwarrior 5.
Yeah.
Now, if you count what it did for the world or the gaming community at the time it came out, totally different answer, of course. That's Mechwarrior 2. It's not even close, right? Mechwarrior 2 Mercs, the original Mechwarrior 2, Mechwarrior 2 Mercs, no doubt about it. But yeah, anyhow, I think it's a really, really fun, legitimate Mechwarrior experience. The Mech Lab might not be perfectly to your taste, and the AI might bother you a little bit here and there, but ultimately that loop is very addicting and very fun. And the good news is we have a 5-year runway.
Yeah, and how I look at it is, again, I look at it a little bit differently just because of the mod scene behind the scenes. One thing that you guys are introducing in the DLC, and it's something I don't think a lot of people even remotely think about, but they should, is one of the things that I think, and it's in the base game, it just never made it fully in, is secondary and tertiary objectives. Like, that's from a modder's perspective, I don't think you guys understand how much freedom that's going to give us, because you're going to be able to do so many things, creative things with that, not only with planets that have conflict zones, but even planets that don't have conflict zones. We've had multiple conversations and meetings behind the scenes of like what that's going to open up to, let alone whether you guys do it or we do it, or if you know, regardless, it opens up that you're not just dropping, doing an objective and then just leaving. It's now there's opportunities for other things to happen and stuff that you didn't plan. And one of the cool things that modders did with BattleTech is they did like an assassination type thing where you piss off someone enough, they may send mercs after you. And we've thought about that, where that could potentially be something that happens where you pissed off a pirate or you pissed off the Steiners enough and they're gonna, you know, your objective is to assassinate someone. Well, guess who else just showed up, and now you got to deal with both of those. And so from my standpoint, I look at it with a different set. I agree with you as far as the rose tinted glasses. I'm guilty of it as well. I think Mech 3 was fantastic as far as dialogue and story. They had that guy with like the voice and the Morgan Kell voice. I think that was fantastic graphically. It was a leap before 2 and it was better. But from how I look at what you guys did, whether people agree or not, you almost Bob Ross the wide sweeping things. You wanted this grandiose, being able to travel around, be your own merc, and you guys did that. The thing that I look at now is something that then Bob Ross does is it gets into the little details. Funny enough, I know we've got memes out there about that, but that's what you guys are sort of doing with the DLC, is adding those to where it's got depth and substance when you do quests and the quest lines, and that the missions aren't repetitive, right?
Yeah, some of those details are out there now, I think, but as a reminder, like just high level, so the original campaign will still be there, of course. You can play through that. Ultimately, that's the timeline just continues on. If people that have finished the game, it just goes on and on. But it's that, you know, you have some war zones to go to and just kind of exist in forever. But the DLC adds a full
career mode. Yeah.
Full career mode. So the career mode is much more freeform. You know, in the campaign, you can play pretty freeform as well. But this is obviously completely freeform, and there is a full, what we call a job board. So you know, you're out there getting your contracts, but there's also all the, you know, the sub tasks and sub jobs and sub quests and things that are mixed in it with all the layers. And then of course there's, I don't know, you know, they've got the infantry, there's airstrikes, there's the game modes, maps, mission contract types, I should call them. It's quite a lot there, and obviously we added a ton of new of the missing, you know, variants in mechs, right? Like almost all the missing variants, and then a bunch of mechs too, and technologies, and the, you know,
so
whatever.
Obviously, we've been talking for a while. We've even lost Matt. I think we should go ahead and focus this, sort of wrap it up. But before we do, there's been a few topics. I talked about this not too long ago. Darren and I, me and you have talked about in the past doing like an NG con or whatever. But there's been, you know, like MechCon was pretty amazing. I loved it. I'll be honest though, I wish I could have experienced it not working. Like that would have been really cool. And I envy everyone out there that was able to just show up and just experience it, you know, and instead of running around with chicken with your head cut off. But is that, now that you guys got the extension, Mech 5, you know, and with possibly a resurgence in MWO, have you guys thought about doing another con? And if so, would it be different than what we've seen, and why?
Yeah, I have thought about this. So what we missed 2019 and 2020. 2020, we just had the very small event, but a few local people come to our anniversary party, but we missed a couple of years. Obviously 2020, yeah, toast because of COVID and what we have to do. You'd hope that by December, if it had to stay, it doesn't have to stay December either, it's just sticking with what we knew. You'd hope by the following year, COVID would not be a thing, but we'll see, right? Yeah, I mean, I have thought about this, and I do think there's a possibility we could have it again. I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, a ton, and I think they were growing every year. We went from 400 to 600 to 1,000, I think was the growth rate. The last space was huge and great. so the main purpose they served for us, and there's quite a bit of difference from 2016 to 17 to 18, and it all goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast was, Mechwarrior Online was still a fairly strong thing in 2016, right? But by 2018, it wasn't. And, we didn't have much to announce at 2018 MechCon for MWO. We took some lumps for that, but that was for all the reasons we've already hashed out. So, yeah, I think I've thought about it. Some of the challenges of it was a fairly expensive show to put on for us, and Piranha Games had to fund the whole thing, right? Harebrained or Catalyst didn't fund anything. We funded the whole thing. The ticket cost, ticket sales probably accounted for, I don't know, 10% of the cost of the show. So it was really a marketing expense. And it was like, and it would be anywhere in the neighborhood of, I think anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 in cost to put on a show like that. And the first year was more expensive because we put in quite a bit for the World Championships. I think the latter years, the last year, even though it was the biggest show, might have been the most reasonable in our costs. We managed to keep it down probably about half what the first show cost us. But still, it was a lot. And certainly, you're just basically saying, well, it's the same cost as if we went to like an E3 and put up a big booth or something. But it's focused for our community. And I'd say in 2016 and 2017, we saw the benefits because 2016 in particular, I think we were able to release a fairly big pack thing after that. Maybe it was Civil War. I don't remember. It's all blurred to me now. But like we'd have some big months in December, January, February where revenues would double up for a couple of months. And you could kind of see the return on investment to a degree. But by 2018, it really wasn't. It was all about, well, we're shipping Mech 5 come December 2019, and hopefully this all feeds in towards just interest and stuff. So it's a long way of saying I think we need to find a way for it to be a little more affordable.
Sure.
If Mechwarrior Online gets really resurgent, and if the Mechwarrior, and a lot of it's going to come down to Mechwarrior 5 on Steam in December too. Like how well does it do? Is it just okay, or is it like really like blowing up and selling very, very well on Steam in December? Well, that'll all play a big part of it. But regardless, I think we'll have to look at it and say, okay, how do we put a show like that on for a budget of $100,000, let's say, and then still get like 1,000 people to come and charge for the tickets so that it's maybe even kind of mostly covered, and maybe there's still like Piranha footing, a bill and marketing expense there, but it's not so overwhelming. Then I think it has a real chance to come back.
Okay. All right. Anything to that, Darren?
Yeah, I think obviously I loved it. It's amazing being in one space like that with the community and everybody in the office. And I think there's the obvious challenges, and it could potentially lead to maybe a virtual con of some sort or whatever.
This year,
if it
yeah.
was, yeah, or like it does. I don't know that we had to stick with the month of December, and who knows, but there's always that potential. Maybe a virtual MechCon or some kind of gathering next year, or I think there's a lot of potential ideas of ramping it down, not necessarily in fun or excitement or whatever, but like Russ was saying, lowering the overhead. So I would love to see it, and of course that is very dependent on how I do in my job, over the coming months, and the reception with Mechwarrior Online and Mechwarrior 5. So I'm all there as far as having it, but it has to make sense, obviously, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, gentlemen, we've been talking for almost 2 hours. Did we miss anything? Is there anything last?
Well, I would like to add, as far as, obviously I'm going to be focused on Mechwarrior Online here for a while, and I'm super excited about that. But I will say that I've been playtesting the new DLC, and I mean, I already loved Mechwarrior 5. I had maybe it's my personality type or the way I play games, but that whole the loop that you get in and the missions and getting your ideal mechs and your ideal lance and your pilots and all, I immediately, that was my gameplay style. I loved it. And now with the mod scene and people being able to just essentially recreate MechWarrior 2 if they want to, I think that's awesome, and that we'll see a lot of cool stuff coming over the coming years. But I get really this DLC is amazing, and what gets me excited, besides the content that's coming with this DLC, which is going to be great and it's going to add a lot to the game. Just Russ mentioning, the potential for 1 or 2 or more DLCs a year. The sky is the limit for this game, and that gets me super excited because I still love it. I'm having a hard time keeping myself out of that game right now so that I could focus on MWO. I am doing it, but it's tempting to just jump in there and play it. It's a very addictive game for the right crowd.
And we're not going to stomp on MWO at all. Like,
no.
People have ideas, hey, you should put PvP in Mechwarrior 5. Well, that is Mechwarrior Online. That's its domain. That's where it lives. That's PvP. I just don't see us doing that. Never say never, but I doubt it. So I'd like to really protect those 2 spheres, right?
Well, we do have, and we do have that perfect, trifecta or whatever. Like I said in my announcement, we've got single player, we've got co-op, and we got multiplayer of Mechwarrior. It's a great time to be a Mechwarrior fan, and that's really how I feel right now. Any way I want to jump into this franchise and play the game, it exists right now, and it's fun. How many games have I played for 8 years and still enjoy playing? Very, very few. And I still love jumping into Mechwarrior Online and playing with everybody. So I think it's awesome. I think it's
speaking
Matt is back. He's back just in time to say goodbye.
And that's it. All right.
Oh yeah, I just went and picked up my kids, Phoenix Hawk and Griffin 2N.
Gotcha. So Darren, now with that being said, are you going to be dropping again? Can people expect to get some dev medallions again? Are you going to be in your Warhammer? Is that pretty much?
So I have a new dev account. I still have the Bombadil account. I haven't determined what I'm going to do yet as far as jumping in, but certainly people are going to see me out in the battlefield. I still absolutely to this day have a blast playing Mechwarrior Online. If I didn't, I couldn't do this job, and so you will see me out there. I'll probably be doing some events again, just like I did before. I'll be dropping with you. I'll be dropping with other members of the community. So for sure, you'll see me out there.
All right, Matt, we're asking, is there any, obviously you missed the last bit, but any last words to the community as far as what you guys are doing, or just anything that maybe we missed in general? I think we covered pretty much anything under the sun. I mean, obviously I know we could go into finite detail about everything. We could talk about Matchmaker. We could talk about balance and hitboxes. We could go down the pipe.
Future podcast.
But that's another.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this is to give like a general consensus of like what it is we're trying to do and outline that as much as possible. Yeah. Let everyone know that, we're not approaching this from, just, we're looking at this like, as Russ says, we're not leaving any stone unturned and kind of take a look at that.
And it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to do something huge for the community.
Yeah.
And, it's a bit of a legacy, and so Matt and I are taking this very seriously, and we are absolutely going to do the best job that we can do.
Yep. And we'll see you at MechCon 2021. No, just kidding.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. Russ, any last...
Did someone already make my joke?
Yeah. Russ, any last moment comments or anything that you'd like to say out there? Last words?
Oh, no. Thank you so much. Glad to be here. You guys covered it. So, yeah, give Darren and his team, Matt here and his team, a little bit of breathing room. I mean, go ahead and keep dumping on them. All your thoughts, all your ideas, they'll keep sifting through them. But
bring it on.
I know it's easy to lose patience. Like, hey, it's been 2 days. Why don't we have a roadmap yet? No, these things it's going to take time. It's going to take a few weeks. So give them a little bit of time, but it's happening.
Don't say weeks, because people expect an answer in a week.
Right.
People were like, Russ said October. It's October, and I was like, it's September 28th. Like, it's not even. It hasn't even been. Okay. Anyways,
I think I talked
Darren's 4th day. So
yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you?
I think I talked less on this podcast than any other NGNG podcast I've ever been on.
Well, I'm
it's
sure,
all good.
Yeah, we'll be back. It's good to have you guys back. Thank you again for being here, Russ, Matt, and of course Darren. You son of a bitch for not telling me. Anyways, everyone out there, I just want to say thank you for listening. And of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure to click that subscribe, like, comment down below. Helps YouTube algorithm, all that fun stuff. But of course, this podcast is supported by you guys, the listeners, viewers. Consider head over to our Twitch channel where I stream Monday through Friday, 12 to 6 p.m. Eastern. And I'm sure you'll see some Darren hop in there as well, and you can shoot him in the mech face. And of course, if you want to support further, consider becoming a patron and things, words and stuff. Sorry, I'm like, I've got like
this guy.
There's things here. There's two things. Anyways, consider becoming a patron. It means the world. And of course, join us on Discord. Discord's a great, amazing tool for us to use for a community. So make sure to head over there. I'll have all the links for all this down below. And for those that don't know too, we do have an audio only version of the podcast. It's up on SoundCloud. I'll have that link down below. So if you use a podcatcher like I do, you can go and take a walk, hike, and just listen that way. Yeah, this was your local No Guts, No Galaxy Mechwarrior podcast. Signing off for tonight. This is Phil. Until next time, Mechwarriors. And then I'll just make goofy faces.